Chapter 9, here we go. Out in the garden the storm had slowed to a drizzle. Confronted with the sights and smells of the African night, Martine's courage almost deserted her. Had her grandmother's bedroom light not come on right at that very moment, she would have rushed back inside. But it did. Martine decided that if she had a choice between her grandmother and a hungry lion, she'd rather take her chances with the lion. The air was perfumed sweet with the scent of fallen mangoes and gardenia blossoms. Martine set off blindly through the dripping trees in the general direction of the game park gate. The one useful thing she'd overheard during her investigations the previous week had been Tende telling her grandmother the new code for the padlock. She made a point of committing the numbers to memory. When her hands touched the cold metal gate, she felt for a heavy chain and that bound it and the lock that secured it. Only then did she switch on her flashlight and enter the numbers on the wet dial. The padlock clicked open. Martine stared down at it, unable to believe that it had been so easy. She realized that she had secretly hoping all along that something would happen to prevent her from getting into the game reserve. She glanced over her shoulder. Once more the house stood in darkness. Whatever happened now, there was no turning back. Martine stepped through the gate and stifled a cry of terror. Two red eyes glared at her. The bushes shook violently, and the water buck sprang up so close to Martine that its fur actually brushed her. With a shake of its horns, it bounded off into the blackness. Martine's heart smacked wildly against her rib cage. She tried to imagine what Tende would do in a similar situation. Not that he was likely to be in a similar situation, but if he were, she was sure that everything would be almost staying calm and thinking clearly. Focus, she thought. I have to focus. I can do this. More than anything in the world, she wanted to find the white giraffe. Why, she wasn't sure. She just knew she had to do it. And as frightened as she was, just doing something for herself and rebelling, even in a small way, against the stifling atmosphere of her grandmother's house made her feel good. The beam from her flashlight picked out the path that led down to the water hole where the frogs were competing in a noisy chorus. Blue lightning shuddered over the mountains on the far horizon. Martine set off as quickly as she dared, trying to avoid the puddles. Even so, her jeans were soon soaked through. In places, the grass was taller than she was, and cold droplets drenched her hair and ran down her neck. As she walked, unseen creatures slithered and scurried and hopped away through the undergrowth. Martine tried not to imagine the worst. She wasn't sure which she was most scared of, snakes and creepy crawly, or man-eating carnivores. And what seemed an age, the temperature dropped, and as she'd reached the water's edge. She tried to pinpoint the exact spot where she'd seen the giraffe. She was pretty sure it had been beside the old gum tree that stood, like a startled skeleton, on the left bank of the water hole. As if sensing dangers, the frogs fell silent. Tendrils of mist hovered over the water, and the night air was laden with threat. Martine squelled the butterflies in her stomach. She'd come too far to go back now. She lifted her flashlight and shined it into the surrounding bush. Nothing moved. Not a mouse, not a lion, not even a bird. Disappointment hit her like a blow. What she'd been thinking? A mythical giraffe? She'd risked her life in pursuit of a fairy tale, and now she had to try to get home in one piece. Sheer instinct warned Martine something was behind her. The same sixth sense told her to turn around very slowly. A Cape cobra was coiled in the mud barely 6 feet away from her. Hood spread wide, swaying in the yellow light. Martine recognized it immediately as one of the most poisonous snakes in Africa. Its golden coloring was unmistakable. So was the band around its throat. The cobra's lips parted and its black tongue flickered out evilly. Martine dropped her flashlight in a panic. It rolled behind the boulder and it dimmed it to a faint glow. And then it went out. In a split second before she plunged into darkness, Martine saw the cobra draw back on its head to strike. Helplessly, she waited for its lethal bite. It never came. Instead, a pale blur exploded from the trees. There was a hideous hissing sound and the flash of flying hooves. The last thing Martine saw before she crumpled to the ground was a white giraffe. Something was tickling Martine's face, something that blew warm, sweet air reminiscent of a freshly mowed lawn on a summer's day in England, or strawberries at Wimbledon, or the rose garden in Greenwich Park in London, which she had visited one spring on a school trip. There was something else that scented too, something wild and exotic. African. Africa? Martine suddenly came to and realized that she was not dozing in a hammock in her garden in safe suburban England. She had entered a South African game reserve in the middle of the night, and something was sniffing at her, possibly preparing to eat her. Cautiously, she opened one eye. A pair of liquid black eyes, framed by impossibly long lashes, stared down at her. "You saved my life," she said. The white giraffe drew back with a nervous snort. It gave a half rear like a horse and retreated to a safe distance. Martine climbed carefully to her feet. The white giraffe towered over her. The sky had cleared a little in the dim light of the watery moon. Martine could see it in an immensely beautiful creature. Its coat shimmered like sunlight, and it was patterned all over with patches of silver-tinged cinnamon. She reached out with her hand to it, and it wheeled around it and made it as if to flee before sliding to a halt, breathing hard and shaking. The wildlife book in her room had explained that although giraffes are basically very gentle creatures, they are quite capable of using their long front legs to kick with a force if they feel threatened. But something told Martine that this particular giraffe would never hurt her. She reached out her hand and again took a couple of steps toward it. "It's all right," she said soothingly. "It's all right. I only want to stroke you. I don't want to harm you." This time the giraffe stood still. When her fingers made contact with its skin, it quivered with fear. But it didn't move away. Martine felt a tingle of electricity run up her arm, the same tingle she'd felt when Grace had put a hand on her forehead. In that instant she had a strange sense. She knew exactly what the animal was thinking. She knew, for example, without having any idea, that his name was Jeremy, or Jemmy for short. And she knew that Jemmy was lonely, every bit as lonely as she was. "I'm alone too," Martine confided to the giraffe. 5 weeks ago I lost everything I love in a fire in England. Now I live with my grandmother who doesn't want me, and go to a school where I don't fit in." The white giraffe watched her warily. He didn't respond. Instead, he sidled restlessly out of the range so she could no longer touch him. Perhaps, thought Martine, he was waiting for a sign that he could trust her. And who could blame him? If she wanted to get close to him, the first thing she was going to have to do was to prove to him that she was a friend. But how? Then it came to her. In England, her mom and dad had a poster in their bedroom of a dove being released into a sunset. On it was written, "If you love something, set it free. If it comes back to you, it's yours. If it doesn't, it never was." Martine could remember, as if it was yesterday, her mom's voice reading it aloud to her and then saying with a smile, "Isn't that wonderful, Martine? And it's true. The more you love something, the more you have to give it space to find its own way in the world. That way you'll know that if it comes back to you, it truly cares for you." As miraculous as it was that she'd found the white giraffe, Martine knew that she had to walk away from him. She took the last lingering look at him. Her heart ached as if she were losing a friend she'd only just made, but somehow she knew they would meet again. For reasons she didn't fully understand, she felt as if their souls were already entwined. "Thank you for saving my life, Jeremiah," she said, adding hopefully, "See you soon?" With that she began picking her way through the mud to the grassy track. She was a bit hazy of the fate of the cobra, but she hoped it was either extremely dead or cowering in its burrow. She wasn't sure if she could survive another encounter with it. She was almost there when a twig snapped like a firecracker in the darkness. Martine had never been much of an athlete, but she was on the very verge of sprinting like an Olympian for the house when she spotted a reflection on the water. The white giraffe was following her. She pretended to walk on. The mirrored giraffe stepped gracefully after her, his white gold coat and silvery patches flowing across the steely water like an elegant ghost. Martine paused. The white giraffe paused. She continued. The white giraffe continued. She swung around abruptly. The giraffe slid to an awkward stop in the mud. He contemplated Martine from this great height. He seemed inquisitive now, rather than afraid. Martine craned her neck and tried to read his expression. She decided that it was like gazing into the eyes of the wisest creature on the earth, and the most innocent one at the same time. Her overwhelming impression of one was of gentleness. She waited to see what the giraffe would do. At first nothing happened, but then he lowered his head inch by inch until his slender nose was close enough to touch. Again Martine smelled his clean, newly cut grass scent. She longed to put her palm against his satiny white jaw, but she forced herself to stay still. Then something extraordinary happened. The giraffe rested his head on Martine's shoulder and made a low, musically fluttering sound. For one perfect moment they stood there, the small girl and the white giraffe, mirrored in the moonlight water. It was only a minute, but it was long enough for the emotions and the confusion of the past few weeks to leave Martine in a rush and suffuse her with a feeling of contentment. She knew then she'd come home. A lion roared. In the eerily quiet aftermath of the storm, the sound blasted through the night as though the beast was about to pounce on them. Martine and the giraffe were in the full flight, in opposite directions, before either of them had given a matter of conscious thought. There were no goodbyes. By the time she reached the safety of the garden, the white giraffe had vanished as if he'd never been. And I'm going to put a few links down below about the cobra. So check out the links below. Thanks.